Need a little ambiance. Hi, I'm Cece and welcome back to my channel. I post videos here sometimes. If you like them and want to know when I post, please subscribe and hit the bell to get notified. You can also follow me on my social medias. Those will be linked below: Instagram, Twitter, TikTok. So this video, if you haven't noticed, I speak with a lot of vocal fry, and for some reason, people, mostly men with no profile pictures, it seems, feel the need to comment on it on every single video I post. I am aware, just so you guys know, I am aware that I have a vocal fry Valley Girl voice and that some people find that annoying. If you don't know what vocal fry is, I'm sure you've heard the term thrown around, but basically just listen to my voice. Vocal fry is basically when you kind of bottom out in the lower register of your voice and this kind of gravelly hoarse sound appears. It's also referred to as vocal creak. Vocal fry is most commonly associated with teenage girls and young women, even though those are far from the only demographics that speak with vocal fry. We will get into more of that later. But this has somehow become kind of a big cultural conversation, like almost a moral panic, if you will. If you Google the term vocal fry, tons of articles come up, tons of opinion pieces that are just people panicking over this allegedly new phenomenon of young women speaking with vocal fry. And it got me thinking that it's kind of weird. Why do people care so much? One reason people commonly give is that it's supposedly damaging to your voice over the long term. I actually used to believe this because I just heard it so much, but I want to just go ahead and dispel that myth. I don't really know how that got started, but if you actually look into it, that's just simply not true, according to most experts. Dr. Lee Axt, who is a physician at Johns Hopkins, says the vocal anatomy is not damaged by speaking in vocal fry. The height of the vocal fry panic was around the mid to late 2010s, and the collective freakout pretty much began with this article in Time magazine that was published in 2014 called 3 Speech Habits That Are Worse Than Vocal Fry in Job Interviews. The article talked about vocal fry in a really negative way and mentioned the Kardashians and Zooey Deschanel as examples of women who speak with vocal fry. Poor Zooey Deschanel is just constantly getting dragged in this conversation. Also, I would be remiss if I didn't mention the Red Scare podcast girls, Anna and Dasha, in this conversation. They are iconic vocal fry queens.
I mean, I'm definitely guilty of having girl interrupted syndrome.
How do you mean?
For, through my teens and early 20s at least.
To be honest, I don't like most of their opinions, and also Dasha would definitely call me fat and a libtard. But I do like their voices. I think they're kind of soothing. I don't know. That's just me. Anyway, this article goes on to list uptalk, nasal tones, and breathy, whispery talk as speech tics that should be avoided at all costs. It says, a recent study found that women who exhibit vocal fry are perceived as less competent and less hireable, not to mention less educated and less trustworthy than those who do not. Collectively, these results suggest that young American women should avoid vocal fry in order to maximize labor market perceptions. Beyond the hiring question, this laconic tone can sound just plain annoying to many people. Well, at least they're honest at the very end about their real issue. Note that throughout this whole conversation, almost anywhere this is discussed, this apparently only applies to women. All of these articles only ever seem to talk about young women or teenage girls speaking with vocal fry, even though there are actually plenty of men who also speak with vocal fry. Penny Eckert, who is a professor of linguistics at Stanford, actually points out that men have traditionally been the biggest users of vocal fry and still are in some places like the UK, for example. So I'm just wondering, where are all the opinion pieces that are men, stop speaking with vocal fry so you can be seen as competent and hireable? In a 2015 episode of NPR's Fresh Air, Penny Eckert gave her take on this relentless criticism of young women speaking with vocal fry. She said, "It makes me really angry. And it makes me angry, first of all, because the biggest use of vocal fry traditionally has been men. And it still is men in the UK, for instance. It's considered a sign of hypermasculinity, and nobody ever complains that men use vocal fry, even though in the past it has driven me crazy because I thought they're just being hypermasculine, trying to be authoritative by sounding even lower than everyone else. So the disparity in people's noticing is just very clear to me. People are busy policing young women's language, and nobody is policing older or younger men's language." Now, as she said, women are far from the only people who have this vocal tic, but when we hear vocal fry being discussed or called out, we're almost always talking about women who speak this way, and it's almost always being portrayed as a negative. I think that demonizing vocal fry is just part of a larger pattern of policing the way that women talk that is really just rooted in misogyny and is used as an excuse to dismiss women's voices and what we're trying to say. Like, these random people on the internet watch my videos, don't like what I have to say, but instead of actually engaging with that, it's easier to just say that my voice is annoying and I sound like a dumb teenage girl. All of this is further confirmed for me by just how nasty a lot of this criticism is. A 2015 article in The Guardian referred to vocal fry as a speech impediment, one that is at best laughable, at worst vocally damaging. A 2015 article by Naomi Wolf, who, if you don't know, is actually a really famous feminist author and journalist, described it as that guttural growl at the back of the throat, as a valley girl might sound if she had been shouting herself hoarse at a rave all night. The less charitable refer to it privately as painfully nasal, and to young women in conversation sounding like ducks quacking. Bob Garfield, who is host of the Slate podcast Lexicon Valley, did a 2013 episode on vocal fry. He claimed that it appears almost exclusively among women, and young women at that, which, as we've already discussed, is just not true. He goes on to describe vocal fry as vulgar, repulsive, mindless, annoying, and really annoying. He said, "I want the oil to stop frying. I want someone to wave a magic wand over a significant portion of the American public," women, "and have the frying come to an end." The podcast 99% Invisible at one point received so many emails complaining about their female reporters' voices that producer Katie Mingle wrote this email in response. "Hello. You've written in to voice your dislike of one of our female reporters' voices. You're not alone. We have a filter set up that automatically sends these type of emails into a folder labeled 0 priority. We'll review this folder and consider the complaints within, well, never. Amazingly, we don't even have a folder for complaints about the male voices on our show because we've never gotten one. Isn't that strange? We think so. Anyway, hope you can continue to enjoy our free podcast somehow. And if you can't, there are plenty of shows that don't feature women's voices at all." There's also a theory among linguists that vocal fry might actually be a result of women trying subconsciously to lower our voices in order to sound more masculine, to be taken more seriously in male-dominated spaces. Women tend to utilize a wider range of pitches when we speak, and also for years have been criticized for uptalk, which is when your pitch raises at the end of a sentence. This is something that journalist Jessica Gross talks about on NPR's Fresh Air. She says that after getting some nasty comments on her voice saying, "You sound like a valley girl, I want to be a socialite," etc., she thought that her voice might be holding her back in her career, so she decided to go to a vocal coach, and this is what she had to say about that. "It did make me more aware of the upspeak. I thought about it more. I think sometimes I overcompensated to where I was maybe doing vocal fry, which I know is something else people complain about, just in an effort to make my voice slightly deeper and more even. I'm doing vocal fry. It's just that. And that was sort of why I moved away from it, is in some ways I feel like I can't win and young women can't win, because if we're not doing upspeak, then we're compensating and we're doing something else that people find irritating. It's like advice that women get in the workplace, where it's be aggressive, but don't be too aggressive because that's off-putting. And so ultimately, I found I just had to be myself and not think about it because I wasn't going to win." That is kind of the conclusion that I have come to on this channel, because when I first started getting these comments, I was like, is my voice really annoying? Is this something I should work on? Do I need to change this? But I pretty much agree with everything that she said there. I think it's also worth noting that generally older people are more likely to find vocal fry irritating, whereas younger people are way more likely to use it in their own speech, especially when interacting with their peers. I think it's important to remember in this conversation that language is fluid and it's always evolving, and that applies to actual vernacular as well as to speech patterns and vocal tics. So there is evidence to point to the idea that vocal fry is maybe just becoming more of a cultural norm as part of the normal evolution of speech. Penny Eckert talks about an experiment she did in which she played 2 short clips of a commercial voiceover. In one of them, the narrator used vocal creak, and in the other, they did not. She said, "It was really stunning because people over the age of 40 heard the more conservative utterance as authoritative, whereas the young people were more likely to find both of them authoritative. But also the older people thought the conservative one was more authoritative than the younger people did." So there's definitely been a change, and those of us who are bothered by some of these features are probably just getting old. As far as her own perception of vocal creak, Eckert says, "I was shocked the first time I heard this style on NPR. I thought, oh my God, how can this person be talking like this on the radio? And then I played it for my students, and I said, how does she sound? And they said, good, authoritative. And that was when I knew that I had a problem." So all of this points to the idea that speech patterns like vocal fry are actually probably more of a generational divide than a gender divide. And this may just be the way that our speech is evolving, at least in American English. And it's really unfair and really sexist that women seem to be the only ones who are criticized and sort of tone policed in this way. So we have all these opinion pieces panicking about this allegedly new phenomenon of vocal fry that is irritating and unprofessional, and it's irreparably damaging our vocal cords. And oh my god, why are young women talking this way all of a sudden? It's a national emergency. Even more interestingly, there is a subset of these articles and opinion pieces that are saying basically the same thing, but trying to put a feminist spin on it, basically making the argument that young women are subconsciously undermining our own voices and handicapping ourselves by speaking this way, and we need to stop in the name of feminism. And while I get where this advice is coming from, I strongly disagree that the way to combat this is to tell women to alter our own voices. One of these such articles is the one I already mentioned that Naomi Wolf wrote for The Guardian. An article in Street Root newspaper gave this response to Wolf's article. Wolf believes that using vocal fry is akin to disowning your power because those who hear you use that tone will immediately think less of you. But here's the crux of the matter, assuming the problem is the messenger when in fact it's the person receiving the message. My problem with Wolf's advice is that it promotes an assumption that women who frequently use vocal fry in their speech patterns are compromising their credibility in and out of the workplace because of the way they speak. The way I see it, Wolf's unsolicited advice was nothing more than a variation on the tired old policing that seems to always take place with women's behavior. This widespread criticism and inability to listen to what women are saying are, once again, another form of dismissal and disrespect. I think this is spot on. Telling women to ditch vocal fry in order to empower ourselves or whatever seems to me like it's part of this larger pattern of women being told that the way to reclaim our power or to be taken more seriously is to behave and speak in ways that are more like the ways that men, older, white, heterosexual men, to be specific, stereotypically behave and speak. And this is presented as feminist advice, and I just wholeheartedly reject that. I just don't think that this is feminist or empowering or good advice to women. This article in Street Root goes on to say, vocal fry can be added to the time-honored tradition of policing women's behavior. Whether it's wearing too little, too much, not leaning in enough, appearing to be too bitchy in the workplace, or appearing too feminine to be taken seriously. When it comes to their behavior, women can't seem to win. Women's voices and women's bodies continue to be ruthlessly scrutinized, criticized, and held to impossible and unrealistic standards. When it comes to the sound of women's voices, an additional layer is added to the discrimination. Women are compared to and judged by what I call the golden standard. That standard valorizes the speech pattern and mannerisms of an older, white, heterosexual male. Anything that veers away from that is perceived to be less credible, less valued, and less influential to those socially conditioned to believe that what is credible, valued, and influential must sound specifically masculine, specifically heteronormative. This policing and discrimination becomes internalized, even among the people who are being policed. That paves the way for unsolicited, helpful advice like Wolf's on how to sound more confident and more credible, when in reality, all that advice aims to do is make you sound more like an older, white, heterosexual male. By the golden standard, that automatically sounds more credible and confident to our ears, socialized to look for those cues. This article is so good, just nails it. To me, advice like don't speak with vocal fry or with a Valley Girl accent because you won't be taken seriously at your law firm goes hand in hand with advice like don't use too many exclamation points in emails to your boss. Don't soften your statements with words like just or I think or I feel like because that makes you seem weak and you need to assert yourself in male-dominated spaces. And I used to fully buy into this because it was sold to me as women are always shrinking and softening ourselves and being passive, and we need to be more assertive to be taken seriously. And while I can see where this is coming from, I really do, I could work on compulsively apologizing less, to be honest. I don't think that the solution is telling women to act and speak more like this golden standard of how older straight white men typically act and speak. While women are undoubtedly socialized to be more polite and affable, and I think there's definitely value in letting women and girls know that it's okay to be assertive and to stand up for ourselves, I think that socialization on the flip side also equips us with really effective, nuanced communication skills. And I think that being personable and just a little bit softer in our communication, as women tend to be, I'm obviously making a huge generalization here. Please bear with me. I think that can actually be a huge strength in a lot of environments, and it's a shame that it's so often seen as a weakness and inherently a bad thing and is shamed out of us in the name of feminism. And not to brag, but I think that I'm a good example of how this communication style can be effective and can actually be a good thing. I do communicate in this way, and I use a lot of phrases like I just think and I feel like, and I think that on this channel I do a good job of communicating my thoughts and ideas in a nuanced way and in a softer tone, and I think that actually opens a lot of people up to what I have to say. I get comments on my videos and also people in real life telling me, you know, I hadn't thought about this in that way before, or I really thought I wasn't going to agree with you, but you made a lot of good points. And I think that that has to do, well, one, I'm smart and I do make good points. But I think that also has a lot to do with the way in which I communicate, and that's why I've made a conscious decision to kind of stop tone policing myself in this way. Even if it means dealing with those comments that are like, you say like too much, your upspeak is annoying, vocal fry, meh. Not to mention that when women do take this advice and try to conform to this golden standard, you know, be assertive, don't back down, ditch the vocal fry, they are relentlessly criticized for that too. I think most women know what it's like to have to sort of straddle this fine line, like assert yourself, but not too much or you'll be seen as a bitch. And I do want to point out that this video is obviously coming from my personal experience as a white woman, and I think that women of color often have to straddle an even narrower and more impossible standard. I also debated if I wanted to bring her into this video, but I want to talk about Hillary Clinton for a second, purely as an example, because I think she is one of the most scrutinized female voices of all time, at least in the US. And I'm talking about like her literal speaking voice. To be clear, there are plenty of valid criticisms of Hillary Clinton, but just setting that aside for now, something that is not a valid criticism of her that we have heard far too much about in 2016 when she was running for president and also throughout her entire career is how irritating people apparently find her voice. I cannot think of a time where a male politician's speaking voice was so relentlessly criticized or criticized at all, or even made a topic of conversation, really. Referring to Hillary Clinton, the word shrill was tossed about a lot, which is a word that's really only ever used to criticize women's voices. In February 2016, Bob Woodward wrote, "She shouts. There's something unrelaxed about the way she's communicating." Former RNC chairman Michael Steele claimed that during one of her speeches, she was going up every octave with every word. Not that it really matters, but that last statement is objectively not true, and I think the fact that that was his perception says a lot. Linguist Rosario Signorello analyzed several of her speeches in 2016 and found that her average vocal tone actually deepens throughout her speech, perhaps in an effort to assert dominance or to dodge this kind of criticism. Anyway, I bring her up because I think you could argue that Hillary Clinton, along with a lot of female politicians, especially of her generation, has done her best to adopt this kind of gold standard speaking style. And all it has gotten her is relentlessly mocked and criticized for the way that she speaks. So if women speak with uptalk or valley girl accents, we are criticized and mocked for that. If we try to compensate by deepening our voices, which maybe results in some vocal fry, we are criticized for that too. So in conclusion, complaining about young women and girls talking with vocal fry or uptalk or breathiness is simply another way to distract from and undermine the actual content of what we're saying. And I don't really think that telling women to stop speaking with vocal fry is a pressing issue at all, or really even a conversation we should be having, especially not in the name of feminism. By telling women to change their voices, we are creating an issue where one doesn't need to exist. We are simply creating another hoop for women to jump through that will supposedly empower us and help us to be taken more seriously if we just comply. But the truth is, there will always be another hoop. If it's not our voices, it's how we dress, or that not wearing makeup is unprofessional, or wearing too much makeup is unprofessional, or Black women wearing their hair natural and not straightened is unprofessional. There is just this never-ending list of ultimately inconsequential standards that women have to bow to, and I am tired of it. I have better things to worry about than trying to consciously change the tone of my voice so that some dude doesn't find it annoying. I want to just wrap up with a quote from Penny Eckert that I think really well sums up the point I'm trying to make here. She's talking about how when she first started her academic career in 1973, she was one of 3 women in her department, and she did intentionally alter and lower the pitch of her voice in an effort to be taken more seriously by her male colleagues. She is reflecting on this, and she says, "You only get change by not allowing it to be a problem to you." And I think this is something that has been huge in all of the years that people have been studying minority dialects. African American vernacular English is a very rich dialect, and yet little kids are told they better not speak that way if they want to succeed in the world. So the question is, do you knuckle under to that, or do you try to make the world change a little bit? And certainly that's how I feel about a lot of the women's styles, is that if we all cower under and say, do what I did in 1973, well then what's going to change? Anyway, that is all for this video today. I hope you found this interesting. Please let me know what you think in the comments. I really enjoyed researching and writing this video. It was a lot of working through what I even think or feel about this. So I'm really interested to hear if you guys agree, disagree, if you want to raise any points that you think I missed. I genuinely always really enjoy kind of saying my piece here and working through what I think and then reading through what my viewers have to say. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. I am so happy to be back from my little hiatus. If you like this video, please do not forget to like, comment, subscribe, follow me on socials, all of that. And I will see you guys in the next one. Bye.